Hello, welcome to some Derps Talk About Movies. I'm your co-host, Mango.
And I am your co-host, Buddy.
And today we're going to talk about Man of Steel and Batman vs. Superman. But before we do that, Buddy, why don't you tell the folks at home what we do on this podcast?
Well, this is a special bonus episode. Wow, that actually kind of worked out better in my head. A bonusode. This is a special bonusode. You know, obviously we typically talk about games, but here we're talking about movies. And up on the slate is like the first big. I can't believe that we call this a summer blockbuster release when it came out in March. The first big summer blockbuster release, Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice, and of course its precedent, its antecedent, Man of Steel, both directed by Zack Snyder, starring Henry Cavill. I don't know. I'm secretly so excited to talk about this that I kind of don't even know where to start specifically.
Okay, so if we want to jump right into it, I think that maybe we should start with let's start with Man of Steel because it's the prequel.
Fair enough.
And back in our Vigilante episode, in the mainline podcast, you had mentioned essentially your issues with some of the typical criticisms of Man of Steel. Some criticisms that I had thought were in some ways fair, but you want to start why you like it. Do you like Man of Steel?
I love Man of Steel. I love both of these movies. I'll just cards on the table so everyone understands, right? I'm a big DC fanboy when it comes to comics. I'm a big Marvel fanboy. I'm just a big comics fanboy at the end of the day, right? But I'm a big DC fanboy in the sense that I've always slightly preferred DC to Marvel. And I'm a big DC movies fanboy in the sense that I really like Christopher Nolan. Obviously, those Batman movies are great. And I really like Zack Snyder, right? Zack Snyder, I think, is a great, awesome director to be at the forefront of a lot of these comic book movies. And so I watched Man of Steel. I didn't even see it on opening night or anything. I watched it in theaters because a friend of mine who was a teenager in high school at the time was really hyped and really pumped about it. And he said, oh, you need to go watch Man of Steel. It's so awesome, et cetera, et cetera. And just in the tone of his voice, I could hear the same kind of excitement that I had when I was a high schooler and these Christopher Nolan movies were coming out. That's what convinced me to go see it. Back in the day when I was unemployed and super broke and did not have the $8 to rub together, I guess 15 or however much it cost to see the movie. But I'm really glad I saw it. I'm really glad I saw it on the big screen. And I don't know. I really like that movie.
Just to establish a baseline, which do you prefer, Batman versus Superman or Man of Steel?
I prefer Batman versus Superman. Okay. In the sense that I like Batman Superman better. I think it's a worse movie overall. I think it has more flaws. And
when was the last time you saw Man of Steel?
Oh, geez. Maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago. I've actually watched it I think since the beginning of this year, I must have watched it 4 or 5 times.
Sure, because you were highly anticipating the Batman Superman.
I was really anticipating the movie, and it's one of those movies that is very good, kind of, when I'm playing World of Warcraft. I've talked about this on the game side of the cast, right? When I play World of Warcraft, when I'm playing Minecraft, right, I like to be watching something on the other screen. A lot of the times, it's, some foreign movie that I got Oscar buzz that I never got around to, or the Imitation Game, which got a limited release and I didn't get to see it in theaters, right? But when I'm in a particularly brain dead, I just want to, I'm not looking to tread new ground. I put on Man of Steel because it's just kind of such a visual treat, and I just never get tired of watching that movie.
Okay, and you've seen Batman vs. Superman twice, right?
Yeah, I saw it twice. I saw it on opening-ish night. In LA, they have these Thursday previews. Right. And the Thursday previews are at, 6 or 8. And so I got a ton of my friends together, many of whom work in the film industry. I think one of whom actually worked on Batman Superman. and we all went to this super fancy theater and we saw it. And then that following week, I just, I went back to see it again on Thursday night after I had kind of come back and read everything I possibly could about all of these opinions and stuff on the movie.
Yeah, for contrast, I am more of a Marvel fan than I am a DC fan. It's not particularly a strong preference. I like particular Marvel characters better than, like those are my favorites, but I don't think I would say I like the Marvel Universe particularly more. I think I know it better. And the answer into the other two things are, I didn't see Man of Steel in theaters. The first time I saw Man of Steel was approximately 3 hours before I saw Batman vs. Superman last week, and I've only seen it once.
Oh, wow, really? Wow.
Yeah. I specifically watched it in preparation for watching Batman vs. Superman, because I kind of wanted to see it before it reverse-colored my judgment, right? Like, obviously, I couldn't avoid the kind of claims about Man of Steel that I had heard in popular rumor, but I have to say that I like Batman vs. Superman a lot better than Man of Steel. I think Batman vs. Superman is not great, but I think it's fairly solid. But I thought that Man of Steel was aggressively mediocre.
Aggressively mediocre. I really like phrases like that. I think a good place to start is so you mentioned that some of these criticisms about Man of Steel, like what were the ones that like particularly landed for you?
So the one that landed the hardest for me was that, like, it seems like a small thing, but when John Kent, when Superman, when young Clark Kent says, "Was I supposed to just let those kids die?" and John Kent's like, "Maybe." Like that kind of struck me as like, what are you talking about? Like,
I see what you're saying. Yeah,
like it's one of those moments where, like, in the normal, that's one of those moments that just kind of like rips me out of this, like this is John Kent, right? Like this is supposed to be like the solid moral upbringing that turns Superman into like the poster boy he is. And I understand you can do things that are different with the characters, which I think that's fine. But I think that, like, Superman's still being very Superman-y, coming out of that kind of, I don't know, piece of it always hurt me. I just didn't like John Kent in general.
I think I see where you're coming from. I've heard this criticism a lot. It's not something that ever bothered me, because I like this interpretation almost where John Kent himself understands that he's being hypocritical. Because the specific quote, actually, that he says, because I've seen this movie so many fucking times, he says, I don't know, maybe? Like, he doesn't know. And I think that, I liked that moment when I first saw it. I liked that moment because there's obviously a tension between the two things that John Kent is saying, right? Like, that you have this responsibility to help people, right? That obviously you should do the right thing and by saving people's lives. But at the same time, I'm afraid for my son if he reveals himself to the world, right? Will that world embrace him? Will that world trust him?
Yeah.
So to speak. And I think that tension is something I felt a lot in the theater, and then only afterward, somebody pointed it out to me. He was like, yeah, John Kent just said that he should have let a bunch of kids die, and I was like, whoa, I didn't even read it that way.
Yeah, so I'll admit that was one that I had heard before I saw it, and so I was kind of like, I kind of expected it, and so that probably colored my judgment, and now that you said that, I can see it as kind of like a, my heart says save the kids, but my brain says no because it's not worth the risk type of thing. And I think I don't think it was the best portrayed point, but I understand the intention.
Yeah, I think, to be honest, I think that's one of the bigger failings of Man of Steel, is that I get, I'm going to use this phrase a lot, like, I get what he was going for, but I don't think he quite, like, stuck the landing. For instance, you and I were talking about this before the cast, obviously. We were talking about, like, oh, by the way, I guess at this point, spoiler warning, right? I guess we have to put up a spoiler warning. We're gonna spoil these two movies. I guess as a quick disclaimer, in case anybody has been seeing, the reviews and hearing the buzz about Batman, Superman, I wholeheartedly recommend going to see it, right? I think it is certainly a theater worthy movie just from like a visual point of view. I think it's a beautifully shot movie, and it is like appropriately kind of grandiose for the for the big screen. I saw it in IMAX. I actually saw it in IMAX once and then not in IMAX the second time, and that difference made a difference to me personally. So I think you should kind of give it a shot. Don't expect the world, but it is I don't know. It's a movie that I like and I recommend to people.
Just to give my flip side to answer that kind of same question, should you go see it or not? I thought it was a solid movie. Like, I wouldn't say run outside right now and go see it, but if you have a movie, if you're going to go see a movie and you're not sure, Batman vs Superman is a fine choice. So the big thing I want to say is, don't listen to the critics that are like, this is the worst superhero movie ever, and it made me hate all the superhero movies ever. Like, I've seen some of those headlines, and it's definitely not true. It is much better than that. That's the 100%. Thing I really want to impress, is like, it is not a bad movie.
Definitely not. But anyway, now, okay, spoilers, 3, 2, 1. Okay, the John Kent death scene, right? The
John Kent death scene. See, this bothers me a lot too.
See, I totally get where you're coming from when we were talking about it the other day, and I never got to the bottom of this personally because I didn't have a chance to go rewatch the movie because I think I was arguing with you at work at the time.
Oh, I actually found the clip and linked it to you. But yeah,
really? I don't remember. Okay, I haven't seen the clip. But we were talking about the John Kent death scene, and to me, the John Kent death scene read as like, this whole thing is about how John Kent is wrong, right? This whole thing is about how John Kent told Superman not to come save him, right? And Superman, Clark Kent, he's really Clark Kent at the time, and Clark listened to his father, and that's a huge regret for him, right? I thought he said that out loud because there's this part where he's talking about it with Lois Lane, right? Lois figures out who Clark is. They meet in the graveyard at Jonathan Kent's grave or whatever, and he tells the story, and then he he says something to her that I thought he just said it. I thought he just said that this was, this was my biggest regret or whatever, but I couldn't find the scene for the life of me on like YouTube or any other kind of place to actually confirm that. What did the scene that you linked to actually say?
So you know what? Here's an idea. Okay, so we just went and watched the clip. I showed it to Buddy. And Buddy, your thoughts?
Yeah, so you're right. You're right in the sense that the argument that we had off this cast, he doesn't actually say it out loud. I thought Superman actually said, it's my greatest regret, but I was obviously misremembering. He asks Lois the question, right? He says,
so
I let my father die because he was convinced, that mankind wasn't ready. And then he says, what do you think? And the implication of the scene to me was always that he regretted that, that thing taking place.
See,
but yeah, you're right. He doesn't ever say, God, see, this is exactly what I mean, right? I feel like I'm seeing, I thought it was, I just thought it was more explicit than that. But yes, it doesn't nail the execution.
So seeing it a couple times now, and just for a little bit of context, I'll actually link to the whole scene in the in the description of the video. That way you guys can judge for yourselves. But this is also, Lois has just found Clark Kent and knows who he is, and I think. And essentially, I think he's making a plea to Lois Lane, or at least it read to me like he's making a plea to Lois Lane to not publish who he is to the world, so that he can. And this is kind of his justification for it. And the way I always, it's only been like a week or two for me. The way I read that scene was, or the theme of the movie was essentially like, Jonathan Kent wanted to make sure it happened at the right moment, that Superman should save himself for when it's necessary and not a moment before, to not throw away what's potentially a one-time thing. And that was my read on that scene.
Interesting. I mean, I think this also kind of comes into how I read some of the rest of the movie, right? Because like, there's also that part where, you know, he goes into the church with the priest, and I mean, you know,
oh man, that's just
tons of Jesus imagery in this place. But where he's in the church and he says, you know, I'm the one they're looking for, right? Should I, you know, like, if there's a chance I should do it, kind of thing. And the priest says, yeah, you know, like, you need to take, and there's the big Jesus in the stained glass in the background. You know, Zack Snyder's a lot of things. He's not subtle.
There was like a straight up a Superman T pose in Batman versus Superman. And
I love that pose, dude.
Oh, God.
I love it. Well, because actually, you know, I do like, in more serious talk, I do like the Superman as Jesus metaphor in general, right? I think it follows pretty well. It obviously follows into Batman Superman, where you know, obviously he dies and is going to be resurrected. Spoiler alert for anybody who doesn't understand the basic principles of comic book blockbusters, right? Like,
or like the basic principle of like the basic purpose of the final shot of Batman versus Superman, which like zoomed in on his coffin and showed the dirt behaving funny.
Yeah.
But
yeah, he is. I've seen a lot of people get bent out of shape about the Christ analogy in Superman, but I personally think it's pretty good.
I think it's a little bit ham-fisted, but I don't think it's a bad comparison. I think, or at least the criticism I've heard is about how ham-fisted it is. But to roll it back,
no, I'm with you from ham-fisted point of view. There's a review on the internet. I can't remember the one off the top of my head, but they just kind of are going through the movie, and they play those scenes, and the entire time the critic is just going, "I am Jesus, I am Jesus." It's just really funny because, you know, it is really obvious.
Just to roll it back to the John Kent death scene for a second, my problem I don't think was specifically with John Kent dying. It's the fact that he died because he went back for the dog. And one, not only is it a dog, but it's also not a dog that we ever like got it. Like, it's not like we showed, you know, him growing up and him like being so invested in this, like this dog is his only friend when he's not, because it's just a dog who until that scene we have never seen in the movie, and he goes back to the car and dies for a pet. And maybe this is just because I'm not a particular animal guy, but that always just seemed like a such like a. So my biggest gripe with it is they could have easily made it impactful by making it like somebody like a person, right? Like a person that's trapped that he could have let out, and that would have made the scene make so much more sense to me.
I guess I feel that. I think it's a little bit nitpicky. I mean, who doesn't? Dogs are universally good at innocent, right? Like, who doesn't want to save a dog, kind of thing. I think this is a bit of like, you know, this is kind of where like the almost id of Zack Snyder is like on full display, because on one hand you're quote unquote condemning Jonathan Kent, right, for this mistake, right? He is wrong to hold up his hand and not be rescued, right? I think that, which is obviously how I see it or whatever. But at the same time, he's also quote unquote right, because sacrificing yourself to save the dog is the exact thing that Superman decides to do, right?
Yeah,
like,
that's
to
fair.
sacrifice him, you know, and so I like moments like this because they are, you know, they're thematically strong and they have a lot of character, even if they don't like when you look at the details, they don't kind of make as much sense, right? And it is really kind of weird and almost hypocritical on both sides.
I think this goes to your nitpick point. This goes back to again what we were talking about in the last podcast. Is like that's the thing that kind of caught me, right? Like if it doesn't catch you, it's fine, but when it catches you and you're like he died because of the fucking dog, like. It just kind of like you know, if it breaks your illusion, what I can't remember the word.
Suspension of disbelief.
If it breaks your suspension of disbelief, it really hurts the rest of the movie.
Yeah, and I think from, you know, and I'll just say my suspension of disbelief is like hard ironclad. Actually, that's not even really all that true. It's mostly that like if I'm being carried by a movie, I'll just kind of go with it, right? This is also true of Batman v Superman, but just to pivot on things in Man of Steel, right? My favorite part of Man of Steel is the action, and my other favorite part is General Zod. I think General Zod is great. He's probably the best comic book villain in any comic book movie over the past 10 years. Actually, I guess 10 years would technically include The Dark Knight. But I mean, just, since the kind of Marvel era has begun, right? Iron Man onward, so to speak, the villains have been relatively lackluster, and I love Zod. He has a purpose, he has goals, he has an ethos, and it's complex and it's complicated, right? And he gets these beautiful, like, operatic moments where he can just sit there and just be like, my sole purpose was to defend Krypton, right? And it's and without Krypton, I am nothing. And I love that. I love that so much. And so I was so swept with Zod and with these Kryptonians and with these fights because those stakes were just so high. That I was willing to kind of forgive a lot of stuff that did, pull people out of the movie, right? The destruction of Metropolis in the end of the movie, I get how people can kind of raise their eyebrow, even though I think they're kind of almost wrong to, because the point of that thing isn't, that Superman doesn't want to save people. He spent, spoiler alert, guys, he spent the whole beginning half of the movie only saving people, right? It was to show the stakes, right? These are the stakes with Zod on the planet. He is going to destroy everything he possibly can because he's been turned into a nihilist with the destruction of Krypton. And the only way to stop him is for Superman to, have his crazy awesome Dragon Ball Z fight scene. I don't know. How did you feel about Zod? How did you feel about all that stuff?
So I get what you're saying. I absolutely do. I do agree that I like Zod as a villain. I liked him as, I thought, the kind of point where it's, my only purpose is to serve Krypton, and that is my entire being, and that's what I will do. I serve Krypton. I don't think that really came through well until he flat out said it, which, I've said some things were ham-fisted before, but my impression of the character when they did the Krypton scene at the very beginning of the movie was that he was kind of he seemed like he was that wasn't the I didn't get the kind of misguided misguided savior from him. He seemed kind of subversive. And in terms of the Metropolis fight scene, I think I'm going to straight up say that this is because the first thing I saw in this whole thing was the Batman vs. Superman trailer. And, the theme of the trailer is essentially, God is dead or God is terrible or whatever. And watching that scene with the kind of knowledge that was going to be part of the theme of Batman vs. Superman, I couldn't help but think to myself, well, no shit. Right? It was interesting because to me it kind of caused me to do this kind of inwards reflection. Because it's do I blame the citizens of Earth for blaming Superman? Because, had Superman not been there, Zod would have never shown up, and this terrible tragedy would have never happened, right? But then, me as kind of a freedom-loving person was well, it's not Superman's fault that someone decided to come after him, right? None of that is his fault, and so I can't blame him for that. But I can understand why, I can understand why people are aggravated about that. And
I definitely feel that. To a certain extent, I think, so the other half of this is I just love, there are a lot of people who, get on Man of Steel's case for not quite being in line with like it is such a radically different take than the kind of Christopher Reeve movie Superman. By the way, all of you people, go watch Superman Returns from 2006. It's a really recent movie. It was also a piece of shit, and it was exactly what the Christopher Reeves movie would have been like in the modern. Just saying. Anyway, the action focus of the movie and the sci-fi focus of the movie was like that really drew me in because so here's the thing. Okay, there are certain characters, comic characters I love. I love like every incarnation, right? Aquaman, I don't know if I've ever said this. Aquaman is my favorite superhero of all time. I love all things Aquaman. I'm a huge Batman fan, huge Green Lantern fan. Thor I love all these characters. Thor, Doctor Strange, Silver Surfer, right? Like these are the characters that I'm just always in their camp, right? But Superman has always kind of lived in like this version of like, Captain America or like Iron Man, where it's like, oh, well, I don't really like these characters in the like they're not my favorites. But when they're telling the right stories, I'm with it, right? And the right Superman stories to me have always been these sci-fi ones and have always been these ones that are about these kinds of stakes. Batman v Superman is actually the version of my like it's the same thing kind of thematically, even if it's different in practice, of my like favorite takes on Superman, where it's like, look, he's not perfect. He is all powerful, but he's not perfect, right? And so if you want to look at it from a Spider-Man perspective and say, with great power comes great responsibility, well, when you're all powerful, you're all responsible. And when you fail to live up to that responsibility, that is a really interesting thing to me. And that's where Superman is the most interesting, as far as I see it. And so this is the Man of Steel version of Superman, where it's like, should I sacrifice myself for these people, right? How can I stop this terrible tragedy from happening, right? And the Batman v Superman version of Superman, where it's like, I am imperfect, right? And I don't see everything. And so even though I want to save, I want to do as much good as possible, there are times when I fail, and those times suck. Though I really respond to those Superman stories, and this is my favorite version of the character. Oh man, God, I don't know. I love it so much.
Yeah, no. See, the problems with the Man of Steel to me were like a lot of like. There didn't feel like a lot of. I guess maybe it's the stakes. It's part of it was, like straight up the middle part of the movie didn't make a lot of sense to me. Like in between, so. Intro stuff happens, then Zod shows up, and what's her name? Lois Lane knows who he is, and when Zod comes for him, like Superman, rather, not Batman. Superman like essentially goes out on a limb for Lois Lane for what doesn't seem to be like an adequately established reason. Like, it just didn't feel like that he should care so much about her that he appeared to when they had met for all of, like, 30 seconds. Or, they had, like...
Right,
so,
I see what you're saying.
And personally, I think that they could have spent the time to build that up, especially given that I thought the Kansas fight scene was unnecessary and not particularly... Like, the only thing the only good thing to come out of that fight was, like, the military being like, he's not our enemy. And I didn't think that needed to happen, like that needed to be so long. I just like, because I felt that one, that they didn't establish enough character building, and two, that the Kansas fight scene was ultimately unnecessary. I thought that whole middle chunk really fell flat for me. And then,
I see where you're coming from. I think that there's there's a lot of pieces to some of this stuff, and I do think that the same kind of disjointedness in Man of Steel comes back again in Batman v Superman. But I think the point where he's in the church and he says, and the priest is like, hey, how do you feel about Zod? Right? Do you think Zod can be trusted? And Superman goes, my gut tells me that he can't. I think that that's basically kind of all of the justification. I don't think Superman go like accepting Zod's plea, and then Zod alters the bargain to bring Lois Lane with them. This is exactly what Superman's worried about, that Zod can't be trusted, right? And that the humanity that he's sacrificing himself for is just going to be swept up by Zod anyway, as sort of.
Sure, but why is Zod asking for Lois Lane in the first place?
Because she knows who Superman is. Oh, they actually, man, that's a good question. Because I know the answer to this, or I know that there is an answer to this because I've responded to this thing before, but I can't think of what it is off the top of my head. Yeah, I don't know. I don't remember off the top of my head. I would have to like rewatch to see the specific thing.
Yeah, it always just kind of like it seemed to be a very personal connection between Superman and Lois Lane that didn't deserve to be there.
That's fair.
And then that's kind of why a lot of that fell flat for me. I thought the action was pretty awesome. Honestly, I thought the crashing of the fucking helicarrier into the Zod's vessel, I thought that was amazing. I think my favorite line in the whole movie was the general repeating back to the Kryptonian woman. You know, it's a good day to die type line. Or like it will be a good death. I thought that was amazing. That was like I think my favorite part of the whole movie.
I secretly love Feora, which is the name of that woman character. I thought she was, like, I don't know. I like the idea that Zod has this like awesome like dominatrix almost kind of like hard ass major domo. I don't know. I thought she was super cool.
See, I love the kind of like even though like it's like when she boards the plane, this kind of unflinching like we know that the bullets aren't going to do anything to them, but that's not going to stop me from unloading a full clip and trying type of deal. Actually, that was my favorite part of the Kansas fight scene too. Is the general pulls a fucking knife out and he's like, "You want to go? I'll go," even though he knows that there's no way to win that fight. Like that just, that. So I guess that kind of thing just, like, that speaks supreme badass to me, right? Like, Superman is superpowered. So, like, he doesn't get any points in my book for going up against a thing that he should be able to go up against.
But Christopher Maloney pulling a knife on...
yeah.
And then there's that other guy, that, like, huge hulking dude. God, man.
Yeah. No, like, I did not like aspects of the movie, but I thought overall, I thought the movie was...
Yeah, fair enough. I think a lot of this also is kind of like, are you a Zack Snyder kind of guy, right? Like, because so Marvel's been around for a long time at this point, 8 years, and I think they have kind of changed the formula for like what a superhero movie is, right? And to a certain extent, I like those things, right? And there are plenty of Marvel movies I really like and I really get behind, and I like some of the things. But one of them is, a more kind of lighthearted tone to these things, which always, and I get it, they're kind of kids movies and everything, and I understand, but it also kind of like takes me out of it to a certain extent as well, right? Like, I'm notoriously down on the first Avengers. I think it's a good movie and I like it well enough, but I actually I wasn't all that invested in the movie because it spends so much time playing up Loki as a pathetic and desperate villain who's wrong and gets beaten by the heroes kind of at every turn, that there's really no menace. And like the whole stakes and the climax of that film, right, where the same kind of shit is happening, but like it's so tonally different, because I think the point of the New York scene at the end of Avengers is to look at all of these, superheroes and go, wow, wouldn't it be so fucking cool to be Iron Man, right? Like, wouldn't it be so cool to be Thor, and lightning fucking, be the Hulk and just completely destroy this crazy floating dinosaur thing or whatever. And I think the point at the end of Man of Steel is almost the opposite, right? Like, doesn't it suck almost to be Superman? Isn't it hard to be Superman? And so while I get and I like these Marvel movies, and I think the Marvel movies are doing it right for kind of like for them. I'm not trying to disparage them at all. I like the variety that comes with the kind of Zack Snyder method, where it's like these movies are less about kind of lighthearted fun and more about like jaw-dropping awe. And I don't know, that's I feel like that's the thing that gets lost a lot when we talk about these critics who are getting all bent out of shape about Batman v Superman.
See, I'm gonna take a little bit of issue with your characterization of it as lighthearted fun, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with liking what I'm going to call the more grim dark movies, which the DC movies have tended to be. Like I personally prefer my movies fairly noble bright. Or at least I prefer my superhero stories noble bright. I think my favorite thing is like the goofball with the heart of gold, and the heroes do the heroic thing and they get their heroic due at the end. I like that story. I like when not everything has to be tinted with the shade of, but everything's terrible anyway. I think that's my personal favorite Marvel movies are Guardians of the Galaxy and Ant-Man, because they really embody that spirit. And I like them better than even like something like Deadpool, because they are ultimately about this kind of noble bright thing. And I don't think that I think it ultimately comes down to preference. I don't think there's anything worse inherently about appreciating the noble bright aspect or these type of noble bright films. I'm definitely with you, right? Like, I'm not trying to disparage one or the other. I'm just trying to say, like, I think a certain narrative that's running against, Man of Steel, that's running against Batman v Superman, is this kind of idea that all superhero movies need to follow this Marvel formula. When I just don't think that that's fair or true, right? I think that's an interesting characterization. I can't what part of the criticism do you think particularly apply? Like I maybe I just you obviously run in more critical circles than I do. I just haven't seen that kind of criticism that it's not enough like Marvel, right? Because everybody loves The Dark Knight, and that's about as
I mean some people put it out in different kind of terms than that, but a lot of it comes down to also kind of Christopher Reeve superhero land, right?
Sure.
Because if we look at the history of superhero cinema, right, you have the Superman movies, right, which are its own era, and then they suck. The Batman movies, which are their own era, and then they suck. And then kind of there was this trifecta right at the beginning of the 2000s, right, of Blade, the first X-Men movie, the Bryan Singer X-Men movie, and the Spider-Man movie, right? And these three movies just kind of like kicked off like the modern mainstream diesel engine of, of superhero movies, right? But for a lot of these early movies, they were kind of following this Batman paradigm, which is like, you give your villains a lot of screen time, right? And you want to establish like high stakes kind of thing. And then almost, I think, the shift of Iron Man and then kind of into stuff like, the Avengers, right, is a shift back to a Christopher Reeves land where it's like the villains don't matter, right? The villains are very secondary to the kind of the main objective. The important thing of these superhero movies is to watch these heroes be heroic and be awesome and be kind of nice. And there's definitely, like, I'm not trying to say that it's not even that I don't like those, right? Because I do. I like a lot of these Marvel movies. It's just that I don't like those exclusively. I think that there's room in the superhero genre for both to coexist, right? And you can have what I consider to be a really good Marvel movie, which is Age of Ultron, is kind of like, it has that lighthearted tone. You get a bunch of people and they're sitting around and they're all playing with Thor's hammer and everything like that. And you get it, and you like these people, right? But also when Ultron shows up and when Ultron's running around, right? That's a big deal, right? That these guys have to drop everything to go fight and to go deal with, right? The same thing, the same thing is true for like the Thor movies, right? Where Thor has this fish out of water charm, and he does and says things that are kind of crazy, and and weird when you put them in like a modern, like in the modern era context. There's a lot of comedy to be had there, right? But look, at the end of the day, right, Loki sending the destroyer armor into onto Midgard that's a big deal, right? And Loki almost killing Odin to try and take the throne. Like these, I get invested in those kinds of stakes, right? And at the same time, you have those movies. You have DC movies where the Joker is he's frightening, right? He is a villain, and he is he's tough to deal with, and Batman has to go right to the brink to beat him, right? The same thing is true for, to pivot to Batman v Superman, the same thing is true for Doomsday and Lex Luthor. Doomsday is going to just destroy the planet, right? The humans, the president nukes Doomsday and he shrugs it off and becomes more powerful, right? Those kind of stakes, that kind of like epic,
if only someone could be our savior.
Yeah, I think those movies are just as,
sure.
I don't know, they're just as, they have just as much space in this superhero marketplace.
Oh, absolutely. And while I might disagree with you as to, like, if the particular movies we're talking about really fulfill that role, I think that at the very least, the the idea that space exists is definitely true, that we could definitely have those types of movies. I was kind of thinking, I have this, or rather, I think I'm going to try and bridge Man of Steel to Batman v Superman proper, with kind of something that bothered me about both films. I want to get your take on it.
Sure.
So, the very end of Man of Steel is Zod, in a subway station, laser eyeing and trying to kill like an innocent family, and this forces Superman to kill him. It's a very agonizing moment, and it's played out well. But the thing that always kind of hit me with that was that not killing Zod never seemed to me to be like a super priority for Superman. Right? It never seemed to me like that would be such a big deal when push came to shove. Mm-hmm. And then to contrast this on the other side, Batman kills a bunch of people, not necessarily directly in Batman vs. Superman, and it's never addressed, right? This not killing people is such, to me at least, a fundamental part of Batman that to not even kind of pay it the lip service just seemed really off to me.
I mean, you and I have talked about this a lot off cast,
yeah.
But the first time I watched Batman v Superman, so here's the thing. I was really spoiled for that movie because I read a script that wasn't very similar. It was kind of similar. A couple of years ago because one had leaked online. I had been keeping track of kind of these rumors, these spoiler discussions, all this stuff. I knew Doomsday was going to be in the movie before that trailer dropped. I knew Kryptonite was going to be in the movie before all of this kind of stuff, right? And but something that nobody ever really addressed beforehand was this idea that Batman kills people, right? So when I went to see the movie, I went to see, and I came out of it, and then I was reading stuff online, right? I'd seen the movie, now I can go see what people are talking about it, right? What people are saying, and everybody's getting, this is the thing, right? Batman kills a whole bunch of people, and I was just thinking back, and I was like, man, I guess I understand where people are coming from, but that really wasn't the impression I got, right? I don't think. I understand where you're coming from. I don't think that the movie particularly cares all that much.
But I think that's my issue, that the movie doesn't care, right? There's an interview with Zack Snyder. I'll see if I can dig it up and put it in the description. He's like,
no, yeah,
this Batman, this isn't a priority for him, and that's fine. But I think it's such a fundamental part of the character that you kind of have to sign. The fact that the movie doesn't even give it a second thought just rings weird to me, as some with even the base level knowledge that I have.
I think they do. I do think they give it a thought because Batman's whole arc in that movie is about how ruthless and cruel he's become, and lightening up from that. Right, that whole that speech. It's in one of the trailers, right? People. One of the things that I get bent out of shape about is critics saying no one has any motivation in this movie. Nobody has any character arcs, and it's just blatantly not true. Like, did these people watch the same movie? Alfred literally says to him, he's like, that rage and that fear and that feeling of powerlessness that turns good men cruel. And he's talking, he says it in their first scene together, and he's talking about Batman, right? And then, Batman is branding these people, which is, that's hardcore fucked up, and he's, shooting gas tanks and exploding shit all over the place, right? And then the end of the movie, right, he refuses to brand Lex Luthor, even though he's, legitimately, like that. That's the arc, right? This is the arc that we're looking at, right?
You know what? So now that you've said that, I don't think that the branding bit signposted Batman not giving enough of a fuck to me, right? Like, I felt like there was a significant leap between branding someone and essentially blowing up a car that a man is sitting in, right? Which is kind of the first thing that happens after, like the first death that happens after that. Maybe it's because, at least, so in my mind, the reasonable, you could make the justification that Batman does not have a reasonable expectation that branding a criminal will cause them to be murdered in prison, right? Whereas,
honestly, that whole bit is a little bit weird. I get why that bit's there. That bit is there to you watch that from Superman's perspective, right? Which is the key difference, right? It's not like Batman saying like, "Oh, I'm gonna brand these guys so that they get fucking murked in prison," right? Superman's watching this news thing where it's like people are saying that this Bat brand is is a death sentence. And I don't think I kind of get what he was going for, but I don't think the moment quite rung.
I think that's part of it. I think so to me at least, right, like Batman could reasonably expect that branding someone wouldn't cause them to be murdered in prison. Maybe that was what we were supposed to take away from it, that he doesn't care enough that he's causing these people to get murdered. But to me, there's a big difference between that and like the reckless disregard for human life of blowing up a car with a person inside is so much more direct of a killing than branding someone and as a consequence having criminals kill them in prison. Also, that logic never rung true for me, right? Like, my immediate thought because he brands someone before they announced it, like it's killing people. Mm-hmm. And my thought was that like my immediate thought was kind of like that would be like a badge of honor almost among criminals, right? Like I went up against the Bat and I survived, or I went up against the Bat. Type of deal. I just didn't make sense to me that would cause people to be killed because it didn't seem like he was. I guess.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think that it's one of the sloppier details of the movie.
Okay, that makes sense.
They kind of drop, right?
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense.
But yeah, I don't know. I see where you're coming at. I just kind of thought that. See, even in Zack Snyder's explanation, I didn't even really feel all that. Like, it's not. I don't think he's making a definitive statement that Batman is, Batman is like hardcore murdering people,
sure.
Right? Because it's Zack fucking Snyder, right? He's like the least subtle director of all time, right? If he wanted to make a point about Batman being the Punisher now, he would have shown that, like it wouldn't be this kind of fair. Like off thing, right? But I think that it's definitely jarring. It's definitely weird. It's also a bit of, it's just to link this back to the comic. It's also something that comes directly from The Dark Knight Returns. That whole bit at the end with the flamethrower and everything, that bit is lifted straight from the comic, like panel for panel straight from the comic, right? Batman busts through the wall. He gets the machine gun. The guy goes, "I'll shoot her. I'll do it." And Batman goes, "I believe you." And then he shoot. In the comic, you literally see the guy fly out of a window with the bullets lancing through him. Obviously, in the movie, he just blows up the gas tank or whatever. But yeah, I don't know. Oh man, can I just say something real quick? I just have to. I love the action in this movie. It's probably the best. Man, I love the action in this movie. But I think the reason I'm very in this Batman camp, this Batfleck, this Ben Affleck as Batman camp, is because of how much they're willing to embrace like just these awesome moments. And this is something that you definitely get it in the Nolan films, right? Flipping the tractor trailer is super awesome and super cool, right? But that whole beginning Batmobile chase when he harpoons the one car and he's swinging it into all of these other cars, like that is such an expression of what I love about these films, right? Because it's very much like they went back in time and they found Teenage Buddy. And they asked Teenage Buddy, what would be a really cool, describe to me a really cool Batmobile chase, right? I would describe something like that. The idea that he harpoons a car and he uses that car to smash into all of these other cars. Or he's like, oh, this one car blows up a thing and it looks like there's rubble and the Batmobile just bursts through this brick wall. Like, that's just so cool. That stuff, I have a huge smile on my face even now talking about it.
See, now a little of that's like I did think that scene was awesome, but a little of it's undermined for me because the first scene where we see the Batman in that house with what I presume are supposed to be like sexual slaves in the basement, when they shine the flashlight into the corner, the Batman is like hung up there like a fucking like bat. He's just like boo. It's like just like. What? Like I couldn't stop. I couldn't help myself from laughing. I thought it was like, oh, it was the silliest thing to me, right? Like I think it might have just been like a misplayed hand type of deal. But
I feel that. I think that movie didn't ruin it for me, mostly because I think that. Okay, so that moment didn't screw anything up for me because I think that everything after that was awesome. I think everything after that was great, right? The point where he's running through and you just kind of see him kind of like moving through the building. I thought that movement itself just looked great.
Yeah, no,
you know
that's
what I
true.
mean? Man, I almost have a hard time talking about this movie because I just like it so much.
Okay,
I just want to talk. I just want to like gush about how cool I think the movie is. But yeah,
So something that also rang a little bit odd for me. I wanted to get your perspective on this. Is that
sure?
It seems like Metropolis is supposed to be the San Francisco to Gotham's Oakland. Would you agree that that's a fair parallel?
Yeah, no, that's definitely true. That's definitely fair.
It seems weird to me that this is like the first time the Bat and Superman are interacting, like that it's because they're so close to each other, right? Like the fact that Superman can see the Bat signal from Metropolis, it just seems weird to me that like they are so close and yet apparently have never run into each other. Until this point.
I would say that's a little bit nitpicky, but I think that the implication is definitely there in the sense of, I think that this whole thing with Batman being more and more of an issue, being more and more of a vigilante and concern for Superman. They do that time skip, that 18-month time skip, right? But it's right in the swing of things, right, where Clark Kent is hearing about all of this is hearing about all of this stuff, and he's really looking at Batman kind of like the one way. I think also is that Batman's been getting more and more brutal, right? The first branding happens. Which is almost kind of this inciting incident to a certain extent, right? That first branding happens, and then the second branding happens during the course of the movie, right? Like, it's not like he's been branding criminals for months and months on end, right? The first one has just happened by the time, which kind of brings him to...
I didn't get that sense. I thought that, like, the branding had been going on for... Oh, I guess you're right, because Alfred makes a point about, like, I guess you've changed the rules or something.
Yeah, in that first news report, they say it.
Right, but like that's also so for the news report. To me, it was like it's been happening often enough that we can confirm it's definitely the Batman and not some wannabe, and like it had been happening for a little while for it to have been reported on. But yeah, I think that's fair.
What did you think of people? So to kind of bring this in line, right? The Rotten Tomatoes review has this sitting at 29% or whatever. Metacritic is a little bit more favorable at 44%. Do you agree with those numbers from like a critical's perspective?
So
like if you were to,
if I were to put a number on it, Batman versus Superman gets 75 out of 100. Like straight up.
Fair enough. Wow, that's actually kind of better than my number is kind of 66. My number is like 2 out of 3. Yeah, I could see 2 out of 3 critics like this movie to a certain extent.
I'm
2 out of 3 things in this movie are good, almost.
Okay, see, like this might be me adapting to the video game scale, but like 75 to me is like it's the fan of the genre score.
Gotcha. I see what you're saying. Yeah, okay. I mean, in the sense of let's say you're a moviegoer and you walk out of this movie and you're like, I wonder what this got on Rotten Tomatoes, and you make a guess on what it probably has, right? You would say 75. Would you go lower?
Well, given that, so for those at home that don't know, the Rotten Tomatoes is opposed to, so Metacritic is an average of all scores. Rotten Tomatoes is percentage of favorable reviews versus percentage of disfavorable reviews. And this might be getting a little bit too meta, but like Rotten Tomatoes being that score is like this movie's like coming out of that movie. This movie's going to be incredibly divisive for like the type of people who care a lot about Batman and Superman as characters,
right?
And as a result, I would expect it to be something around 50%, right? Like half of people like it, half of people don't like it, and that gives you a solid 50.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah,
but that's only because I know the Rotten Tomatoes algorithm.
Fair enough. Yeah, definitely. See, because to a certain extent, I actually think that this is kind of emblematic of some of the problems with kind of the Rotten Tomatoes, and even though the Metacritic is also kind of like this thing, but it's less bad than Rotten Tomatoes is, just because I had the same problem with Star Wars: The Force Awakens. Right, Star Wars: The Force Awakens comes out and it's a pretty good movie, but because pretty good skews up, right? Like, and it's a binary rating. That movie has like a 97%, right? Which is to me just like ludicrous. That it's rated that high, and I think the same thing is true of Batman Superman, but on the bottom side, right? Like I think it's a movie that's kind of half it. Like there's some cool stuff in it, there's some flaws in it, right? And hey, maybe the flaws outweigh the thing. It puts you down, right? And that tanks it all the way down to kind of 29%, even though even most of these critics, right, barring the super kind of hyper fanboy critics that are just mad because this doesn't really match up with their version of Batman or their version of Superman, right? I think almost all of them were willing to give the movie credit where credit was due, right? Like Batman is awesome. The action scenes worked really well, right? And they were willing to point out the flaws where the flaws were, right? The pacing was really weird, and there was a lot of connective tissue missing from scene to scene, and so I don't know. That's I guess maybe I'm getting we're getting a little bit too wrapped up in these.
Yeah, just I think this is more of a criticism of how Rotten Tomatoes works, right? Like the Rotten Tomatoes,
yeah.
The Rotten Tomatoes audience score is 70% liked it, which makes sense to me. I think the issue with Rotten Tomatoes is that it's good for most movies, but for movies that are kind of divisive like this, it tells a weird story. And for like on the opposite end of the spectrum, kids movies it doesn't work for, because kids movies are always going to get or it's very hard to get a negative score out of a kids movie, right? You always get some form of positive score.
Yeah, it's just because everybody downplays it. It's like, it's for kids, so I don't really care that it's blatantly emotionally manipulative to kill off the imaginary character, whatever his name is.
Sure.
Bing Bong.
Yeah. Did you see the you mentioned this in the other, but did you see the Your Movie Sucks? A review
I watched. I have just finished watching his entire backlog. I mean, okay. He is a very, very much the opposite kind of critic in the sense that I am, right? Like, okay, so here's how I kind of think of this is how I rate quality in movies, right? I don't think that all movies are created kind of like qualifyingly like equal, right? There are some movies that aim low and some movies that aim high in terms of kind of subject matter, what they're trying to tackle, and kind of, you know, like complexity, right? And so I am very much in this camp of like, if this movie has high aspirations but doesn't quite meet the mark, I'm very favorable to that kind of movie, right? But if a movie has relatively low aspirations, is a very kind of straightforward film, and, you know, gets, you know, 10 out of 10, gets gets it all right, I am less favorable to that movie than kind of like the norm would otherwise suggest. And this keys into, you know, like I'm willing to forgive a lot wrong with Superman, Batman, or Batman v Superman, because I think that, you know, I think the characters are really complex, and I love these themes, and I love these character arcs. And the more I think about, this is a big test for me, the more I thought about Batman Superman, the more I liked it, right? The exact opposite was true of Star Wars, by the way. The more I thought about Star Wars, the more kind of vapid and empty I found it to be. But the more I thought about Batman v Superman, the more it felt like the more I was uncovering. It felt like I was finding new stuff in there to kind of get into. And so just so everybody knows, this is how I rate quality in movies. That's this.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Yeah.
I think this is a little bit of why I'm a little bit negative on those kinds of Marvel movies. I don't think, you know, the Avengers isn't really trying to really accomplish all that much besides, hey everybody, look at all these characters, you know, they're in the same universe now, compared to, you know, like I kind of mentioned this before. I love the Superman arc in this movie because it is about Superman dealing with his own imperfection, right? With the fact that he's not that he is not a perfect person, right? And I love that moment when he comes out of the, you know, like, the Congress has literally blown up in front of his face, right? And he goes and he's talking to Lois, and he says, "I'm afraid that I didn't see the bomb because I wasn't looking for it," right? Like, I feel that so hard. I love that. I love that version of the Superman character, and I have a lot of empathy for that version of Superman, because I think the Boy Scout, the noble, bright, best, you know, he's the best that we can possibly be version of Superman is also the kind of Superman that we complain about when we're like, oh, Superman's too perfect, Superman's too powerful. You know what I mean? I think that those are very hand in hand.
Oh, yeah. No, I absolutely agree. I think a conflicted Superman is an interesting Superman. And I think they handled it fairly well for this film. You kind of, in a roundabout way, are coming around to something I want to discuss, is I actually really loved Lex Luthor.
Did you really? That's interesting. Yeah. He seems to be the most... People are universally in the Batman Wonder Woman camp. They think Gal Gadot, and they think that Ben Affleck did a great job, but everyone wants to get on Lex Luthor's case. I was actually pretty bad. I was very negative on Lex Luthor. I saw what they were going for, but I really thought they missed, right?
Oh, really?
And I thought Jesse Eisenberg was really miscast. And then I saw it again. And I saw it again, and I saw it again. I had seen everything, and I had this is a little bit like I saw it again, and it clicked way more for me. It just I saw. There's a lot of attacks based on the Lex Luthor character about his motivations and about like, oh, why is he doing this? Why is he doing that? His personality changes, right? Like every 5 seconds. That's actually not true. What I like about him, he has a very clear character arc as well, right? And I don't know. I'm much more in camp Lex Luthor, and I do hope he makes a return in the DC universe now.
I agree. Like I think I was not so sold on the very final scene with him where he kind of like starts ranting through the jail cell. But I think for most of the movie, I really like the kind of like crazed genius type of idea. I really like the kind of like, I live in Silicon Valley, the kind of like Silicon Valley,
right? Yeah.
Dude type of aspect to it. I love like just little, things like, how crazy he is. He's willing to blow up what appears to be like a very trusted advisor of his.
Yeah, dude. No, Mercy Graves. That's like that. That's not a little character. That's a real character, right? She is like his right hand person. In the comics, she's actually an Amazon, which always I don't think they're doing that in the movie. I wish they kind of were, but it always makes for like it's like little interesting tidbits about Mercy.
But yeah, the fact that he's willing to like send her to that fate just so he can like make his point, right? Like I don't know. I just really like the way he played out. I liked, even like the kind of like things that like seemed like the kind of like like the eagerness, right? Like he even even something that like it's either, if you consider it one way, it's kind of like a weird plot point, and the other way, it's like him tipping his hand a little early because he's so excited for this. Is Clark Kent meets Bruce Wayne. I love bringing people together. Like, why does he care about who the hell Clark Kent is? Right? Like,
yeah, honestly, I think a really cool part of this movie is that he knows both who Clark Kent and Bruce Wayne are.
Right.
It's really, it's not something they really go into, right? It's very subtle and everything, right? But like Lex Luthor clearly knows that Bruce Wayne is Bruce Wayne and Clark Kent, or Bruce Wayne is Batman and Clark Kent is Superman. And so I think, honestly, I think this is a bit of what I liked so much about the second viewing, right? When I knew that fact, it really recontextualized that scene.
Oh yeah, right. Like it seemed to me that's like he tipped his hand a little bit early, but no one caught it. Right, like they were too busy. Like Bruce Wayne was too busy trying to like hack some shit, and Clark Kent was too distracted by like why is this Bruce Wayne character acting all weird? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Although that is followed up by kind of like I think my least favorite scene in the movie, which is when they go into the basement. Wonder Woman has stolen Batman's dongle, and Clark Kent, Clark Kent looks at the television screen and sees like a house fire in Guatemala or wherever. It looks like it's supposed to be South America, and he's just there, and he has another like straight up Jesus moment. Like,
yeah, I know what you mean.
And I just saw that, even more so than like the T-pose in space, that moment was just a little bit too much for me.
I don't necessarily begrudge you. I don't necessarily begrudge you that. I like that moment just because I liked that they lingered on it, right? That I think that this was really important for setting up the conflict in Superman, right? He wants to understand this whole thing with Bruce Wayne, right? He's hearing this and everything, and then he sees this fire, and he doesn't immediately go, like, right? Like, he doesn't immediately leave. He takes a minute to consider, like, which is the right thing for me to do here, because it really helps set up this that same kind of conflict. Honestly, something that I didn't like it in the first time I saw it, but then I got it the second time I saw it, was the John Kent scene, like that dream sequence, where he's up there and he's just moving, he's Sisyphe, like, he's just moving these rocks, right? And he tells this story about how, a flood happened, and so he and his father saved the farm by diverting the flood, but it went and it completely destroyed the Lang farm. By the way, comics tidbit: Lana Lang is like Superman's first love interest, and if I remember correctly, I think her farm does go, like, her father's farm does go under, and he's abusive, which is just like, little details. I love him. Anyway, yeah, and he talks about how he thought he was being a hero, and he was eating this special cake that his mom baked, that his mom baked him for saving the farm and everything. And all the while, the Lang farm, these horses are drowning, right? And I first I was really struck by that, and I was just like, wow, that's bleak, right? Like, you know, this idea that no matter what Superman does, there will always be negative consequences, right? For every person he saves, every person there will be some negative consequence to it that he's not seeing, and that's going to be bad, and that sucks. And I was just like, and I was almost so depressed that I didn't hear the second part of that story, which is the important part. In the second part of that story, he talks about, Clark asked him, he's like, because obviously he's feeling the exact same way. Clark asks him, and he says, does that feeling ever go away? And Jonathan Kent says, yeah, as soon as as soon as I met your mother, right? And I realized in the second viewing that scene isn't there to try and make a philosophical statement about how every time, Superman saves a cat out of a tree, a tree branch falls and kills a little kid, some craziness, right? Like, the point of that story is the appearance of that, right? How Superman has to let go of this idea that he is responsible for all of these consequences and do the right thing no matter what. That's what's important. And that scene actually comes back later in the movie because he repeats the quote to Lois Lane, because the specific Jonathan Kent quote is something along the lines of like, I met your mother and she was my world and she changed, and she got me over that hump, essentially. And when Superman rescues Lois Lane, and by the way, the most ridiculously contrived rescue ever, when he rescues Lois Lane, that's what he says. He says, "You are my world," to her, and then he goes off and sacrifices himself to kill Doomsday. And I just love that so much. And it's something I totally missed on the first time. It's something I totally missed the first time I saw the movie.
Oh, that's absolutely fair. Well, yeah.
Yeah, I think, I don't know. I think there's a lot... I think there's a lot on the surface that turns people off to a certain extent. I agree with everybody that's like, yeah, Lois Lane really doesn't have any reason to go back. First of all, she doesn't have any reason to throw the kryptonite spear down the well in the first place.
Right.
Besides, I guess just to get it away from him, but it's kind of whatever. And then she has no Alfred... I think there's a scene missing where, like, Alfred calls her or something, and it's like, by the way, Superman needs you to get that spear back, right? And so she goes and she gets the spear. I
think it was this weird thing because, like, I remember when I first saw it, I thought that it was like, oh, she wants to get rid of it, right? Like, and I kind of assumed that the well that she threw it in was like deep, like that it was going to be gone. And I had at that when I first saw it, I assumed that one of the super people was going to have to go get it. Hell, I was even like giggling to myself as like, Aquaman comes up and is like, here it is, and like hands it,
it's funny,
and hands it off. But like it when the pool was that shallow, I was like, what, like why? But it's
one of the first rumors about the movie, I bet, and I actually think that there is some credence to this, I bet it was in the script for a while, but they probably cut it out, was that that whole bit in the beginning with the Indian Ocean and those divers and Lex Luthor's person, that whole bit was that whole bit was an Aquaman bit, where Aquaman was cleaning up like the wreck, and he finds the mineral and ends up giving it to Lex Luthor. I get why it's one of those things where I think that's a cool moment because I love Aquaman so much. I just want him to be all over this fucking movie, right? But I'm definitely glad that they changed it because there was nobody talked about a motivation at the time. Nobody knew any of this other craziness. They just the thing was that Aquaman was very involved in the cleanup in the Indian Ocean, and that he found kryptonite there. But did you how did you feel about those Justice League that completely out of place trailer for the Justice League movie that was just in the middle of it?
Honestly, I thought it should have been a post-credit scene.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%. I think it should have been a post-credit scene.
Like that would have been perfect, right? Like you get the glimpse of the icons in the regular movie. That's fine. And then the post-credit scene is like Batman being like, "No, let's see about these other files," and going through them.
Yeah, I think that they're
or even not post credits, but like a denouement type thing, right? Like you've got like they're showing Superman's like grave, and like they're like playing some ominous music, and then it flips back to Batman looking through the files, and then like the dirt starts, like the last shot is still the dirt flying up a little bit, but like it's like
and Wonder Woman's over his shoulder in the Batcave.
Yeah,
that would have been way better. That would have been way better.
Yeah, I think on kind of like a more universal scale, I think it's a mistake to have the Flash be a different Flash from the TV series. I don't watch the TV series. I think this is just from kind of like it's like a branding perspective almost, right? Like if you want to, I like cohesive universes, right? Like as kind of like fiddly as like the Marvel TV series connections to the real series are. I like the fact that those moments are there, even so small as they are. I just think it's a mistake to like just ignore essentially the TV continuity.
To a certain extent, I've almost from a business perspective, I agree with you. I think that so the DC TV series, I love all of them. I think they're all spectacular. Arrow, Legends of Tomorrow, and the Flash and everything. I think really what it comes down to is like a creativity thing. The Flash and Arrow and Legends of Tomorrow are obviously way lower in budget. They have a different tone because of that. And it really does hamstring a lot of the things that it really does hamstring kind of a lot of like the creative decisions that can happen in the universe and in the world, because you are a slave to 5 seasons of Arrow continuity, right?
Well, that's fair.
And everything like that. And so from like that perspective, I'm definitely kind of down with it, right? I think. I'm a little bit sad because for a long time it was rumored that Christopher Miller and Philip Lord of the Lego Movie and the 21 Jump Street kind of fame were going to be doing the Flash movie, but they ended up just writing it, or I think they're not even writing it anymore. They're just doing a concept for it. The director of the film is going to be somebody different, and I think it's going to be I think that having multiple versions of the same kind of character almost is going to be neat, right? Like I think that doing a movie version of Captain Cold or a movie version of the Reverse Flash who's a little bit different than the TV version, who obviously has a certain subset of motivations and all of this extra kind of like continuity weighing him down, is a pretty good it's a pretty good starting point, right? So that nobody has to feel like they have to go watch 3 seasons of The Flash in order to go see his, movie that comes out in 3 years.
See, if I were DC Cinematic Universe chairman, I would say that Flash doesn't get his own movie, because there's also practical concerns there, right? You can't if you put a TV star in a movie, he's going to demand more movie for the TV series, and this kills the TV series.
Yeah, that's huge part of it.
But if I was DC Cinematic Universe chairman, I would have there not be a Flash movie and just have him appear in the Justice League, because I think you can get away with character in ensemble movie from a TV series, but that's more of a business consideration than anything else.
Yeah, that's
go on. Sorry.
The biggest hot rumor, just while we're on the Flash, actually, is that based on Zack Snyder's producer is his wife, Deborah Snyder, and she's another huge producer. She's kind of there's a couple of like inside baseball behind the scenes stuff in it, but there's more of like a kind of committee that runs the DC movie universe, and she's on that committee. But she gave an interview where she implied that Cyborg and the Flash are going to be in the Flash's movie, which is I see. This is the stuff that I like, and this is the stuff that I really want these movies to come into. Right? I love the idea that when we get a Ben Affleck solo Batman movie, maybe he goes and talks to Henry Cavill for a scene, right? Because Batman and Superman are buddies, and he wants his opinion on how to deal with whatever, right? Or in the Aquaman movie, he has to go kind of consult Themyscira and Wonder Woman, in the same way that almost like Ant-Man runs into Falcon or whatever. I like those interactions, and I think those little kind of saying, okay, here's somebody who carries her own movie. This is Gal Gadot obviously does Wonder Woman, but in the Aquaman movie, she comes in first and just to kind of help him out do a thing, right? That is something that I'm super down for when it comes to all of these movies, Marvel and DC, non-discriminate.
Yeah. Also, quick question for you. I have no idea about Cyborg outside of like the Teen Titans cartoon. Is the scientist supposed to be his dad? Because I definitely got that impression. Okay.
The original Cyborg story is he gets hit by he's in a car crash, and his dad Cyborg arises him, and then he becomes part of the Teen Titans. DC revamped their continuity a couple of years ago for the quote-unquote New 52, right, where they do kind of 52 different comics or whatever. And in that continuity, Martian Manhunter is no longer a founding member of the Justice League. Cyborg is. Cyborg gets... he gets basically attacked by Darkseid's minions, and he gets kind of covered in this like crazy hellfire stuff. And so in order to save his life, his father basically fuses him with, this is arcane lore. Okay, in like Darkseid's world, they use these things called mother boxes, which are really, really advanced computers, right? And they're these they're what allow Darkseid's people to teleport. These are what the boom tubes are. If you've ever seen Superman the Animated Series, those big tube things with like the kind of rings that come out, that's a boom tube that's created by mother boxes. Cyborg gets fused with a mother box in order to bring him back to life, and he's a founding member of the Justice League. And that crazy cube thing, that like oscillating hypercubed kind of tesseract
it's
craziness. It is that's a mother box, and so that was like kind of like the birth of
Optimus Prime.
yes, of Optimus Prime. Honestly, okay, so secretly one of my favorite DC Universe properties is Teen Titans Go, and which is, by the way, one of the funniest. It's so good. There's an episode though where they're making fun of 80s power metal like albums and like album covers being just kind of like so ridiculously weird but also simultaneously awesome. And in the end of that episode, Cyborg becomes Cyborgimus Prime, and he transforms into a truck. So yeah, anybody who wants to go see that, it's called 40%, 40%, 20%, and it's amazing. Just a little shout out.
Okay, so to wrap it up, I want to ask you a question about one scene in particular about Batman versus Superman. Cause,
sure.
I'm going to hold back on telling you what my thought. I might have told you already, but what did you think of Martha? Why did you say that name?
It is. I thought the moment played fine for me the first time. I was with it. I was in the moment, and I got it so instantly, right? And more importantly than I got it, I didn't expect it, right? I almost had no idea how they were going to reconcile this whole thing, right? When the two of them were throwing down, and it was such a clever way, I think, to get at the point, right? Which is that Batman is looking at Superman and thinking he's just another alien like Zod. He's just another supervillain like all of these supervillains who I've fought, my entire career, right? Batman willingly dehumanizes Superman so that he can kind of justify him, his actions. And it was such a great moment to symbolically be like, hey, by the way, Superman is a person, and he has a mom, right? And not only that, I got the connection almost instantly, and I was just like, and I actually think Ben Affleck played it pretty well, where I was just sitting there and I was just like, oh my God, you must be sitting there just like, I can't believe I fucked up this bad, so that it really worked for me. And then, you kind of think on it in hindsight. It's kind of cheesy, right? Like, it's a little bit contrived. Like, why does he say it that way specifically, right? Like, wouldn't he just call his mom? Doesn't that not make a lot of sense, right? But I don't know. I was so with it the first time that even though I get that stuff, I understand where it's coming from, right? I could care less.
See, like, perhaps this is unexpected, but I actually really loved it too. I thought it was. For different reasons than you, like I get your humanizing point, and I think that's very good. But to me, I thought it was almost kind of like poetic that something so trivial that like their mom happened to have the same, like that's what keeps Superman from dying. Not that he's a superhero, not that like Batman on his own accord is like well, what the fuck am I doing, right? The fact that something so trivial that their mom happened to have the same name. Like, that little coincidence is just what caught... Like, I thought that was pretty neat. I thought that it was... It's not so big and so important and so overwrought to like, stick out as, like, like a Deus Ex Machina to me. Mm-hmm. But I thought, like, just, these little things that, like, these little things in the world that, like, can make all the difference for nothing, right? For the fact that, two people have the same name. I love that. I know. It rang the right way for me in that scene.
Yeah, and I think to a certain extent, the reason that it's running the wrong way for a lot of people, I think, is because they were not, they weren't like me, where they were kind of swept up in everything, right? They were turned off by the minor inconsistencies, or they were turned off
because... This is part of the building fury.
Right, exactly. And so, because I was so with the movie, I just couldn't care less whether or not it was kind of an awkward moment in reality, right? But I definitely see, if you're the kind of person that wants Superman to be Christopher Reeves and you're getting really bent out of shape because he's not, and you're sitting there and you're just clenching your fist and you're like, I can't believe they're doing this to Superman, right? Like, if you're that guy, yeah. If you're that kind of person, I can see how, like, this is something where you're like, oh my god, that's so stupid, right? Like, I'm sure if I was more with it in, just to draw a parallel here, like, I'm sure if I was more with it in Star Wars The Force Awakens, if I was more swept up in that whole thing, right, that the weird little moments that did bug me on a second time, right? How Rey is just unconscionably good at, fucking everything, right? And, see, the problem is I liked Force Awakens, but I didn't get as swept up in it and everything, right? Spoilers here, by the way. When Han Solo died.
Oh, I would say similarly for me, the moment when Rey does the Force suggestion trick in the chair was the moment where it was like, okay, that's too much. Let's mentally go back through everything.
Yeah, and you know what else it was for me for Rey? It was when, they're in the middle of this fucking lightsaber battle, and Kylo Ren, he makes a swing and she blocks it, and the camera's so fucking close on her face, right? And she's sitting there and she blocks it, and she closes her eyes. And her eyes are closed, and it's like 4 or 5 seconds, and then she opens them with all this like renewed vigor and everything. And I was just sitting there, and I was like, Kylo Ren is the worst fucking swordsman on the planet. He should have sliced her like 6 ways to fucking Sunday when she's sitting there, right, like with her eyes closed.
Buddy, he got shot with a caster bolt.
Yeah, right, like,
which doesn't matter at all until we need to justify this point.
Yeah, and and the same thing is true. The point I was going to make earlier was like the Han Solo death scene, right? There's a part of me that Man, see, this is the kind of stuff that I live for in Star Wars, right? My favorite Star Wars movie is Revenge of the Sith because I get so swept up in it, right? And because I don't care how stupid it says when he says, only a Sith deals in absolutes. Yes, I understand that's a retarded thing for somebody to say, but I don't care because at the time, I'm just really, I feel the loss between Obi-Wan and Anakin, right? I feel how they were brothers and that brotherhood is fracturing and I'm with it. And I have so much pathos for this whole thing that I don't care. I'm with it, right? But for the Han Solo thing, it was the exact opposite because it was just like the movie was like, by the way, Han Solo's gonna die, and it's gonna be a lot like Obi-Wan dying. Do you see what we're doing? Do you see how this is a lot like Obi-Wan dying? By the way, Han Solo's dying, and it's gonna be a lot like. And I was just sitting there, and I was just like. And then he died, and I was like, well, first of all, that was ridiculously predictable, and second of all, that moment was entirely ruined because the movie wanted me to know how much it was like I wasn't in the moment. And I don't know why it works for me in Batman versus Superman, and it doesn't work for me in Star Wars: The Force Awakens, but there's just something there that was.
Yeah,
I don't know. There's something there that was missing.
I don't know if there's a name for it, but it's like I think it's like these moments that like catch you and like rip you out of it. The more I think about these things, about whether these kind of things bother me or not, the more I can like trace it back to these kind of individual moments that kind of really like hurt it for me. But yeah, that's our take on Batman v Superman and some other subjects.
Yeah, definitely, right? I actually, man, oh god, I love this movie so much. I really hope people do see it, even though I guess a lot of people, just to touch on this inside baseball stuff. Superman Batman had a ridiculously powerful opening weekend. It's made $700 million in however many weeks. The DC universe slate is obviously moving forward. It being a box office success is a good thing, and we're still going to get all these other movies. I think it's going to be interesting because the ones that are coming up, Suicide Squad, Wonder Woman, the first Justice League movie, are going to be very different tonally to Batman v Superman. I think Justice League is going to be nowhere near as bleak. Because at the end of the day, I think this movie was so bleak so that it could get to the point at the end where it is, brighter and more positive, right? You end this movie with Superman, right, reconciling this conflict and no longer feeling the guilt that had been paralyzing him. You end this movie with Batman abandoning this cruelty because he understands, he understands who Superman is and the kind of and that he shouldn't be so quick to judge. You end this movie with Wonder Woman, right, who literally, she literally says, I left the world of man because of how horrible it was. She still comes out and defends it, right? And so I think that things will get notably more positive from here on out. So you have that to look forward to from the Noble Bright in the Noble Bright future.
Yeah. I agree.
Okay, well, yeah, I guess we're done. We'll probably do these intermittently. I imagine we'll probably end up doing one for Civil War because I have a lot of thoughts about that movie already because I know a lot about what happens, but I'm really excited for it.
Don't spoil it for me.
I know I don't want to say anything, obviously, but that's in a month. I'm sure that there will be other stuff where we can unlock our bonusodes.
Yeah, bonusodes.
Yeah. Have you watched any of Daredevil season 2 or anything along those lines?
Not yet. I watched Jessica Jones in preparation for Daredevil season 2, and I haven't watched it yet.
Yeah, I haven't watched Jessica Jones. I really need to get around to it.
I like Jessica Jones a lot. We could talk about that some other time. Maybe that'll be another bonusode, the Marvel Netflix series. But until then, you can listen right on this channel for our normal content, which is video games and tabletop games content. You can email us at somederpsplaygames@gmail.com to tell us what you think of Batman versus Superman or any other topic you really wish to. You can comment on the thing. You can watch us play tabletop games live at Some Derps Play Games, or twitch.tv/Some Derps Play Games. We've got a YouTube channel and Facebook group. All these links will be in the description for everything. Anything you wanted to say, buddy?
Nope. I think we're good to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Until next time, dear listeners.
Until next time, dear listeners.